Vortex Fragoris, which in Latin means vortex of noise, stands for one of the bad pursuits, which is the success. This is the final How I Wrote the Lyric video for Pursuits in Life 2 record, but it's going to be a little different than the other ones because here I'm going to be focusing mostly on explaining the story behind the almost 26-minute long title track Vortex Fragoris. There are some Easter eggs I'm going to mention as well, so there's quite a lot to talk about. So just a few things before we start. Originally we were referring to the track as Statera, or Statera ab intra, because that was the original title I was sort of going for, but once the story developed, we changed the name. I actually wrote the lyrics in like June or July 2021, so quite a few weeks after we had already started recording the album. The drums had already been recorded and I was in the middle of like recording guitars, synths and keyboards. This was the last track I wrote lyrics for. The next song was Golden Times, and the only section that had already had lyrics when I started writing it was the part 5, The Ocean of Noise. When I was putting the whole section together, it didn't really make sense not to have any lyrics. I knew what it was in terms of the story, so I just wrote it. We lifted from the demo, but the rest of the track I wrote in like June or July. Vortex Fragoris is a sequel to the track Vortex Labyrinthus from the first album, which was sort of the title track of the debut album, and it also ended the record. It was almost 15 minutes long track, and I had this video called What is Happiness? Vortex Labyrinthus essay. You can check it out here. Before we start with the actual story, I think if you get familiar with the track Vortex Labyrinthus, it's gonna definitely strengthen the overall impression from this composition. And also I think that there are quite a few Easter eggs that you can find out on your own. If you have done that already, you have my huge respect. Or if you prefer me to explain everything to you, let's start. We're gonna start with a very brief summary of the track Vortex Labyrinthus, which was this very metaphorical autobiographical track that looked at my music career since the beginning up until the creation of the first album. There was this whole struggle in the maze, hence the title Vortex Labyrinthus, and it sort of ended with this big revelation at the end where I realized that the happiness is not about how far you reach or where you get, but it's about enjoying the journey. That's really just like the gist of it. There's a lot more to it. And Vortex Fragoris as a sequel basically looks at my music career in a metaphorical way since the completion of the first album up until the creation of the second album. Of course, it's written in a way that it's sort of relatable to anybody because I wasn't really specific. Let's start with the actual story. Part 1 is called Dawn of Hope, and it starts exactly with the same chord that Vortex Labyrinthus ended with. And this is also the reason why the key of the song actually goes half a step higher. So now we are in D major. The whole section is very heavenly, it has very uplifting atmosphere, it's almost spiritual in a way, very cinematic, and it's supposed to embody that big revelation that came in Vortex, and this is continuation of that mood and of that atmosphere. There are no drums in this section, so it's really very ambient-like, based on textures. Once the beginning starts, you hear this melody, which to me represents hope. And when I start singing, this really represents what I was feeling after I had finished recording the first album. There's a sense of destiny, and I know it's a sign. This is how it's meant to be when stars align. The whole lineup, musicians, how I put them together, everything, it really felt like this is how it was supposed to happen. I can see beyond horizons, the land of milk and honey awaits. So the land of milk and honey really represents the goal I had at that time. And the goal was really release the first album and start making music as a career. I genuinely thought that with the first album, when I release it, I could start my career as a professional musician. And it really felt like my whole life was sort of a building up to that moment. And that's basically the ending.
All my life was leading up to this moment. I'll be sure to pursue now this notion.
There's a lot of hope and there's this sense of destiny, really. Like I was looking up ahead, I saw the goal of like doing music professionally and I was like, it's there. I need to release the first album and I'm gonna be headed that direction. Also, metaphorically speaking, sun is rising through the clouds, clearing twilight's last remains, warming everything around on these sands. So just like with Vortex Fragoris, it was the maze as the sort of a symbol of the struggle and of the journey of everything. Here it's the desert, which you can partially see on the cover as well. The sands, the wasteland represents a struggle of following your dreams. You know, there's this desert you have to cross and whatever you want to achieve is after the desert. Also, after I stop singing in this section, we go into this chord progression, which is the same as was the main chorus in Vortex Fragoris. And here we hear two melodies played by the saxophone. And the first melody that you hear is actually the melody from that main chorus in Vortex Fragoris, which is a flashback. Musically, it's referencing back to that big revelation. It's not about how far you reach. Happiness is a way of life. No need to strive. It's like remembering that big revelation, which is serving as a fuel now and as something that's driving me to go forward. In the second half, we hear the melody from the main chorus of the next part 2. So this is like foreshadowing. Yeah, there's a journey up ahead, but whatever the journey is going to bring, however difficult it is going to be, I'm going to be there for it, I'm going to enjoy it, and it's going to be awesome. That's basically the point of it. Now we go to part 2, which is called Fata Morgana, which is like a more fancy term for mirage or mirage if you're from America. Basically, this is like a play of air and heat. If you're on a desert, you see this Fata Morgana, you see this vision of a water in the distance. If you're really dehydrated and starting hallucinating, it may seem like that there's a village or there's some place where you can go. So that's basically what Fata Morgana stands for. This whole section is very urgent, it's very tense, but very uplifting at the same time. You basically have a very strong groove. It's really just going. There's no stopping in this section. This is also the section where the drums finally come in. And lyrically, this is based on a lot of the motivational quotes. Working hard with devotion, desire and ambition, powered by a dream, all this can appear. Like the only things I will ever need for all expectations to be exceeded.
Powered by a belief, if I set my mind to something, it will be achieved.
It's basically that pursuit of success.
Powered by the guide of those few lucky ones who reach the top.
All of those motivational quotes were usually created by people who had been successful. Powered by the assumption that the only recipe is to excel and do my best to fulfill my destiny. There's still this very strong sense of destiny. I'm following my dreams, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And the chord progression in these choruses is the same as in Vortex Fragoris, and this is because it serves as a really driving force, and I like the overall movement of it. It's not a very overused chord progression, plus it sort of connects both tracks in that hope that these choruses are very hopeful. And then the midsection, the instrumental midsection, to me represents like playfulness. It's a bit strange rhythmically, but it's very playful. I'm about to start the journey through the desert, and the playfulness should show that drive, that I'm not afraid, you know, I'm just gonna go through the desert and I'm gonna reach my dreams. It's gonna be awesome. The second half of this part is roughly the same. Again, we have a lot of the motivational quotes, remember, stay positive, you're the one in charge of your own narrative. And there's this first time when things don't sync. In this part, I sing and I go lower and the music goes lower. Then I sing, I go higher and the music goes higher. And it's the second verse where it's the first and the only time where it's not in sync. Within grasp, I go higher in pitch, but the music goes lower. And then within reach, it's reversed. I go lower and the music goes higher.
Powered by the dream, it can really appear within a grasp, within a reach. Triumph is almost guaranteed.
This is the foreshadowing of things getting much more complicated soon. And the first seed of doubt is introduced in the final chorus in this part, powered by the illusion that to cross this wasteland, I need to excel and then I will reach the promised land. So this is the first grain of doubt, if you will. Then we go to part 3, which is called Remnants in Dunes. This is where things start getting darker, more serious. And you can see that on the beginning. The beginning theme is based on that playful midsection in part 2. You can hear that the rhythm is a bit slower and that there's less notes that we play, and generally it has just a darker vibe, even though in terms of the key we still are in major. And then there's this moment where the darkness is introduced, and this is the beginning of the journey through the desert. We can also hear a couple of riffs, and the final instrumental section before I start singing is actually based on a similar harmony approach. Like you have the bass note and the third note like in Vortex, and there was this one particular section in Vortex Labyrinthus that I considered to be like the musical embodiment of a struggle through the labyrinth or through the maze in that track, and I decided to use it here as an Easter egg as well. So you have basically the same riff or the same movement, is just in a different key, but that to me represents the struggle, and I wanted to introduce it also here because going through the desert is a different but struggle nonetheless. Also, the words and the lyric has a totally different tone as opposed to the previous two parts. Now that I have boldly ventured forth, I am accompanied by doubts. So remember that last chorus from part 2 was like the first grain of doubt, but suddenly there are more doubts. That's usually what happens when you want to achieve your dreams. There are just a lot of naysayers and just, let's say, the clash of dream and reality.
And I have boldly ventured forth, I'm accompanied by doubts. On me by almost everyone. Everywhere I look, all I can see the dunes of failures, pale reminders of those who have tried and never won.
You will just hear all these examples of people who tried to achieve their dreams and they didn't, which is, believe me, much more common than achieving them. And this is very important.
The further I go, the less I see the place I want to reach. Was I driven by display of air and heat?
This is referencing the title of the second part, Fata Morgana, that land of milk and honey that I saw beyond horizons. Was that really just a Fata Morgana? Was this a play of air and heat? When I finished the first album, the prospect of doing this for a living seemed much more realistic than when I actually started working on it. And this is about me starting doing all of sorts of promotion and writing to whoever I could, trying to strike a deal with the label. This whole part is still before releasing the first album, but I started already taking steps to make sure that the record was going to be successful. Suddenly, that prospect of doing it for a living seems further. You know, you start realizing how much you actually have to do to achieve your dreams, and the actual goal gets further because you just have a better look at how big of a journey it actually is. The mirage gone, now I see, not far from me lies a beach that embraces ocean I must also beat. Originally I just thought there was this metaphorical desert I had to go through, but crossing the desert, as difficult as it is, and as few people as have managed to do so far, it's not the only thing I have to beat. There's also an ocean. The ocean. The other sections are just kind of developing it further.
I was also counting on having goddess to help me carry on.
It's also about that sort of a loneliness, because even though I had a lineup, I was basically doing everything alone, and it definitely didn't make things easier, obviously. If you are in a band, one of the beautiful things about being in a band should be that there are 2 or 3 other people who should work on it in the same way as you do. And then we go into the chorus that is, in my opinion, quite powerful, and there's still quite a lot of hope in it.
Even if we're alone, I will find a way. I will look for a stream through this monstrosity of an ocean.
This is also the difference between the desert and the ocean. With the desert, you can kind of see where you're going, but with the ocean, it's just dark. You don't know what's there. It's totally hidden. It's much harder to actually cross the ocean.
For the remains of that fire still present today, reminding me of the dream, belief, guidance from devotion.
This is referencing all of the choruses from part 2. Powered by the dream, powered by the belief, powered by the guide.
Powered by the dream, powered by the belief, powered by the guide.
All of these things I'm trying to remember as I'm struggling through this desert. Caught up in a sandstorm, I realize I still haven't crossed this wasteland. The very limits of my skills are tested. Everything here makes me believe I'll never reach the promised land. Whatever I'll do, I'll always be bested. Apart from those motivational quotes, there's not much to really persuade you that it's gonna go the way you want.
Now I'm finally at the shore. All the answers lie beyond the ocean's door.
This is basically like shortly before releasing the first album. I've crossed this desert. It was really hard. Not many people have managed that, but still, you know, it's just one of the tests I need to pass. Now I'm finally at the shore. This is referencing the next part called At the Shore. This part is actually the only section that is instrumental. It doesn't have any lyrics. It's very foreboding. It's very dark. You hear this melody. It's very serious. There are all these textures, but it's definitely dark. It's very dark. And this is that moment being at the shore and maybe being just a seconds away from actually diving into the ocean and seeing what's inside in real life, few days or weeks before releasing the first album. And there is this one moment where we actually change the scale back from the minor to major, and you can hear that melody that represented hope in part 1. This is the moment of like last breath before diving in and last glimmer of hope before releasing the album. Then we go to part 5 called Ocean of Noise, which is this sort of a chaotic avant-garde vocals only section. The whole part for me is like this musical manifestation of that moment when I released the first album. Hey everybody, here's my debut album, go check it out, it's really unique, it's great. And that's basically the first line, hear me out and look at me, all I've got and all I give. And then there are 13 other voices being introduced, all of which more or less say the same thing. I don't want to be the one who's left behind. Look at me and tell me if I'm worth your time. I just got to wait for my breakthrough. Hey you there, give me a chance. I need some finance. Don't mind them. They're just spam. People even working against each other. And some of these lines are kind of funny. Some of them are referencing like the Ocean of Noise, like
What's with all these people? It was just a rainbow. Just a sound.
This is also a musical experiment because that first voice you hear,
Hear me out and look at me. all I've got and all I give.
That's supposed to be me releasing my first album. All of the other 13 voices are thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of other musicians and artists and people literally doing the same thing. And as the voices are being introduced, try to stay focused on that first voice, on me. And you're gonna realize how difficult it is, because there are just so many other voices that you can't even really see or hear where that original voice is, even though it's dead center. This is also the internet in general. There's just this ocean of information, an ocean of noise. It's just, there's so much noise and it's very difficult to find anything. It's even harder to be heard. And even if you are like super rich and you'll invest a lot of money into the marketing and promotion, you're just gonna be louder, but you're not gonna make other people more silent. Story-wise, this is also why this section is not really that harmonic and that musical, because it represents the chaos. It's not supposed to be harmonic. This is really how I felt, you know, as I started doing the marketing and the promotion, quote unquote, for the first album, I just started realizing how many other people like me were out there, and it was insane. Like, for example, I would write to somebody and they'd be like, okay, we have 50 other records to review, or we have 200 other artists we have already covered this year. I'm like, oh my god, who are these artists? Like, there's an ocean of noise. And then after these voices end, you can hear that initial voice once again, but I was trying singing wise to sound very tired, almost like my voice is worn out from all of the screaming, from trying to scream through that, like, whoa, everybody take a notice of me. That's why it's very vulnerable, very worn out, very quiet.
Hear me out, look at me, all I've got and all I give.
And after this we go to this just a drop section. I was actually inspired by one class where I teach, and they had this quote on a board: even if we are but a drop in the ocean, let us be the one that will color it. On one hand, I thought to myself, that's a really nice quote, but on the other hand, I was like, that doesn't really apply, does it? And that's why you can hear this electronic chorus singing just a drop in the ocean, because we're all really just small drops in this ocean of noise. There's very little to no chance screaming your way through. It's basically the main chorus from part 3, but I sing fewer syllables, it's an octave lower, and it generally has a different vibe.
I believed in a cliche that a small ambitious drop would find a way how to color the ocean, leave a mark for all to see. That passion and hard work are the only keys. Now I'm left to doubt that notion.
And then we go into the section that foreshadows part 6, because it's basically the chord progression of the chorus from the next part. Part 6 is called Lost in the Vortex, and I would say that this is probably set quite a long time after I had released the first album. And there's a lot of contemplating, a lot of very important questions being asked.
Have I failed? Is this the end? Has my one chance just been spent? What's next for me?
When I was recording the first album, on one hand, I thought that this could be it. This could be my one chance, you know, if it works out, I'm gonna do this for a living. If not, well, at least I've given it a go. But I couldn't help but wonder every now and then, like, okay, is this it? Is this my only chance? Like, will I never get another chance to make another record, to try it again? I still remember that moment. That was in 2018 in summer, so that was just a couple months after I had released the first album, when it sort of came to me that, oh my god, it didn't work out. It's not gonna work out. I'm not gonna do music for a living. Like, game over, man, game over. And I remember my then girlfriend, now wife, Julie, we had been together for about 2 years at that point, and she told me like, wow, I had never seen you that depressed and that melancholic. Of course, there was still a long journey after that, and I was working really hard after that. Not that anything really changed. Probably the most important questions are asked in the second verse.
Have I thought too much about myself? Or is a life just so damn unfair? Answers I see.
Why didn't I succeed? Is it because my album, my singing, my music and everything is just not that unique, not that great? Or is it really that life is just unfair? There are too many people trying the same thing and it's just oversaturated and there's basically no chance to cut through? Which one is it? And honestly, I still don't know what the answer is. And then we go into the chorus. History exemplifies those who achieve their dreams, which is what, like 0.0001% of people. It's like extremely small as they reach for the sky. Not one mention though of the rest who just try. There are so many people who try and who even do it in a good way. They just don't really get there. Nobody cares about them. And then the final verse.
So many quotes, how to succeed, not one to soothe the taste of defeat.
This verse puts part 2 Fata Morgana in a different perspective, because suddenly all of those motivational quotes can be seen as a toxic positivity. Because if you follow your dreams and you are sort of motivated by these quotes, you are in for a disappointment, because these quotes will raise your expectations and you will have this feeling that yes, I will work hard and I will achieve my dreams, but you probably won't. There's like 99.9% chance you won't achieve your dreams because it's just not possible. The system is set in a way that you would have to be a millionaire to come to a somewhat of a level. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but exceptions to the rule don't make the rule. So it means that there's no way to become successful. I know this sounds very depressing. It's just basically analyzing how I feel and what the story is about. And then after the second chorus, we go into the saxophone solo, a beautiful, beautiful solo that sounds almost hopeful. I think it has a very nice vibe, very nice melody. There's almost like this sense of acceptance in the solo, but then we go again to that main chorus of part 3, where everything gets darker, more oriental. Then you can hear me sing the same section as I sang in part 5, but in part 5 I was singing it in a very vulnerable, defeated way, but here I'm very angry.
And I believed in a cliche that a small ambitious rock would find a way how to color the ocean, leave a mark for all to see. That passion and hard work are the only keys.
There's anger, there's disappointment, there's bittersweetness. Basically the whole song ends with me being defeated. I've given it a go, I tried to achieve my dreams and I didn't achieve them. So in a way this can be seen as the Empire Strikes Back of the Star Wars trilogy, you know, where the heroes were defeated. So here the hero, me, is defeated. It's very probably depressing, very melancholic, but this is the second installment in the Pursuit saga. There's gonna be the next record, Pursuit in Life 3, which is gonna have this big epic that's gonna continue and finish the story. I already have a pretty clear idea of where the story is gonna go, even though the story as such is still being kind of written. It's probably gonna put certain things in a different perspective, but this is basically what the song is about, and this is the whole story of Vortex Fragoris. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you checked it, you have my respect because it's definitely long and it probably shows that you're interested in the track, so huge thanks for that. You can let me know in the comment section how you like my interpretation, how you like the story. If you had your own interpretation of the story before watching this video, definitely let me know, because every person is different, so every person can see the story a bit differently, and I love different interpretations of the same story, so definitely hit me up with the comment. Thanks a lot for watching.